channel. So in today's tutorial, we're going to go over Flask-RESTFUL. So Flask-RESTFUL is a library that is used to make a CRUD API, RESTful APIs or CRUD APIs. That's what we're going to cover today. It's just a library built on top of Flask. So if you guys are new to Flask-RESTFUL, you can just go to Google and then search for let me just bring the documentation. You can just search for Flask-RESTFUL, and this is the framework. You can just go ahead and install it. And this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to build a simple CRUD API using Flask-RESTFUL. So this is going to be the very basics. I'm not going to do anything complicated. You're going to be using an SQLAlchemy database and stuff like that. So you're not going to do anything complicated. Just to introduce you to the framework. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to install the library that is called Flask-REST framework. It's just built on top of Flask. That is that will enable you to build RESTful APIs. So if you are new to Flask and you want to get a big introduction to Flask, I have a whole series on introduction to Flask. I also build an API using pure Flask, but this is just an extension on top of Flask to make it things much easier. So if you want to see how to build an API using just Flask, I have a tutorial on that, but in this tutorial I will show you how to build it using this add-on on Flask called Flask-RESTful. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is to go ahead actually create a directory that you're going to be using. So I'm going to create a directory. I'm just going to use the mkdir command. So if you're on Windows, feel free to use the GUI or whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call it Flask-RESTful API, just like that. And I'm going to now change directory into Flask-RESTful API, and then I'm going to change directory into that. So you can see right now, if I do an ls, I have nothing inside. If you're on Windows, to do an ls its equivalent is dir in Windows, but in Linux and MacBook it is ls. Okay, so now that we have that there, let's go ahead and create a Python virtual environment. So Python 3 and then -m venv, and I'm going to call my virtual environment venv. So this command will not work for you if you're on Windows. So if you're on Windows, you can go to Python official documentation and read how to create a virtual environment. Again, if you're not interested in creating a virtual environment, then you don't have to create a virtual environment. You can just install it in your global Python environment, but I like to separate my my Python environment whenever I'm working on projects to avoid cluttering my global Python environment with unnecessary libraries that I don't necessarily use. So I hope you get it. So this is how to create a virtual environment. I think if you're on Linux and MacBook, I'm not sure MacBook, I'm not sure, but on Linux this is how you create it. On Windows it's completely different, that I'm sure about. So you can just go and read the official documentation, and you don't have to create it if you're not if you don't want to a virtual environment. But it's just good practice to have a virtual environment. So let's just wait for this to create the virtual environment, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, now you can see the virtual environment is created, and if I do an ls, I can see I have a folder in there called venv, which is the name that I specified right here. Okay, so now I'm going to activate my virtual environment, my virtual environment. So I'm going to do source venv venv/bin/activate. This is going to activate my virtual environment, and you can know that the virtual environment is activated whenever you can see the name of the virtual environment folder in parentheses in front of the line within the terminal. So that shows that our virtual environment is activated, meaning that whatever libraries we install from now will be installed in this virtual environment instead of the global Python environment. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to copy this command, which is just going to be pip install Flask-RESTful. So I got this from the official documentation of Flask-RESTful. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my terminal, and I'm going to simply paste that there, and that's going to install Flask-RESTful. So we just have to wait for this to install. It's not a big library, so it shouldn't take that much of a time. Yeah, as you can see, I have Flask-RESTful already installed. So now that's great. I can just go ahead and clear the terminal there, and I'm going to create a directory. I'm going to call it CRUD API, just like that. I'm going to call it CRUD API. Let me just keep this with lowercase, so make CRUD API, just like this. and I'm going to press enter, and that's going to create for me a folder called CRUD API. Okay, so I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code, or feel free to use any editor that you're comfortable using. I'm going to be using VS Code, so I'm just going to open up my Visual Studio Code. And in this tutorial, we're also going to be testing our API using Postman. So if you don't have Postman installed, well, it's time that you get Postman installed. We'll use Postman to test the functionality of our API, like sending post requests and other put requests, delete requests. You're going to be using Postman. So make sure that you have Postman already installed on your machine. Okay, close this for now, and I'm going into my CRUD API folder, and I'm going to make another folder. I'm going to call it API underscore application. Okay, I'm going to call it API underscore application, and that's where we're going to keep our application. So API application, just like that. And inside of this folder, I'm going to now keep the following. So I'm going to have another file in here. I'm going to call it underscore init __.py. So this is the project structure that I'm trying to create. So this is going to be __.py, and then in there I'm also going to have another file. I'm going to call this one I'm going to call it yeah, I think this will be enough. This will be okay for now. This is okay for now. So in here I'm going to create instead of this the CRUD API folder, I'm going to create a Python file. I'm going to call it run.py. So this is our project, the structure. I will add more to this, but just in a second. Let's just go ahead and actually set the CRUD API up. So you have to go inside of the init folder, so init file rather. So we're going inside of the init file. I'm going to say from Flask import Flask. So Flask-RESTFUL already installed Flask for you, so you don't have to worry about creating about installing Flask. Okay, so I'm going to create a Flask app, and I'm going to call it Flask, and I'm going to say __ name __. So this is going to create for us the Flask application. So to deal with some secular imports, I'm going to create another file in here. I'm going to call it, this is going to be routes.py. This is where we're going to keep all our routes. We're going to keep all our routes here. So inside of this, I'm going to deal with some secular imports. I'm going to just say from this is API application import routes, just like that. So this is to avoid some secular importation errors in Python. The secular importation are very complicated topics to talk about, and I'm not going to explain it in this tutorial, but make sure that you have this importation or you have some issues when working with your application. Okay, so sorry for that. Now that you have done that, you can just go back here. So we have created a simple Flask application. So how do we turn this Flask application into an API? So let's go ahead and actually import from Flask _RESTFUL. We're going to import API, just like this. Okay, so down here we're going to create an API. So we're going to say API is going to be equals to the API, and we're going to pass in our Flask application. So this is going to turn our Flask app into an API. Basically, that's what we're trying to do here. So now that you have done that, we can just go ahead and go to and go to run.py. You're just going to say from API _application. We're going to import app, just like that. Let me just undo that. So just like that, you're going to say if you're going to create an entry point, if name equals quotes __ main __, you're just going to now say app.run, and you're going to say debug, and debug is going to be true, just like that. So this is going to, now this is the point we are going to run our application. So the run file is just for running our application. What we've simply done is just to have imported app, which is this instance here, the Flask instance. We have just imported it in here, and just creating an entry point to our program, saying if name __ name equals to __ main, and then you're going to simply say app.run, which is going to run our app server. So now that we have that set up, we can go ahead and actually try to run our application to see if everything works. So I'm going to go back to my terminal, clear this, and I'm still going to run Python. Let me just check the directory in which I am. ls, I'm going to change into the CRUD directory, CRUD API directory, and I'm still going to do python 3 run.py because the run file is here. So I can just press enter, and this is going to start our development server on our local machine. which is basically our API. So you can see it has been started. It's running on localhost at port 5000. So that's the traditional port for Flask to run. So this application is running on port 5000 on localhost. So everything works fine. So the main thing that I want to cover in this tutorial is how to create a simple database and set up our database configurations. Okay, so I'm going to go back in here. One thing I need to do before creating my database, I need Flask-SQLAlchemy. So I need to install this. So I'm going to go back to I have the official documentation pulled up here. I mean the how to install SQLAlchemy. You're going to be using the pypy.org. So this is the link, the command to install it. So I'm just going to copy this command. It's just pip install Flask-SQLAlchemy. So I'm just going to go back to my terminal and then simply paste that in there. So make sure that your virtual environment is activated before pasting this, or it will install it in a global Python environment, and that will lead to issues, okay, errors in your code. So just wait for this to install, and once it's installed, we can go back and then set up the database. So you can see it's already most of the requirements are already fulfilled. So it's just going to finish installing just in a second. Yeah, and it's done. So now that it's done, we can go back to Visual Studio Code, and in Visual Studio Code I want to import it here. So I'm going to do this from Flask underscore SQLAlchemy. We're going to import SQLAlchemy, just like that. So from Flask-SQLAlchemy, you're going to import the SQLAlchemy, and then you're going to set up our database configuration. So configs, I'm just going to leave a comment here, config. So in here configs, I'm just going to put my app config. So I'm just going to say app.config, and I'm going to set a configuration value here. So I'm going to set a secret key. So all this is going to be uppercase, so make sure it's uppercase. So then we secret underscore key, and this can be any random key, just to it prevents against some kind of attacks. So we're just going to set a secret key here. So make sure that this key is very secret. You can even keep it in a env file and then use the python.env library to refer to it. But for simplicity, I'm just going to keep it here. But it's not good practice to keep secret keys in your code. Okay, so I'm going to go into my terminal and then just get the Python interpreter. So it's lowercase Python 3. I'm just gonna get the Python interpreter. So I'm going to say import secrets. Once secrets is imported, I can do secrets secrets.token underscore hex, and I'm going to pass maybe, let's say 20. So this is going to generate for me a random token hex. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to use this as my secret key. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to exit the Python interpreter, and I'm going to come here, and then I'm going to create a strings here and then paste that in there. So this is going to be our secret key. Great. And then I'm going to set app.config, and this is going to be, sorry, this is going to be a list, and this is going to be uppercase SQLAlchemy underscore database underscore URI. Okay, SQLAlchemy underscore database underscore URI, and then this is going to be the following. So even if you go back to the Google and you check the pypy.org, you can see it gives you the specifications over here. So you can even just copy this if you want. So I'm just going to copy it, and then I'm going to move here, and then I can just replace it here. It's going to be the same thing. Now we're going to change this to be, we're going to call it we're going to call our database, let's call it data bases, like that. Database was SQLite. Great. So now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and now specify the DB. So the DB, it is going to be the SQLAlchemy, and in here we're going to pass in the app simple. So this is going to be our database. Whenever we're referring to our database, we'll be referring to this variable called DB. Okay, so this is going to be SQLAlchemy, and then I pass in the app, and that's going to be specifying use as our database. So now that we have our database set up, we can actually go ahead and actually write the schema to create our database. So I'm just going to create another file in here in my application API underscore application. I'm going to call it models.py, where I'm going to keep all my database models. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to import the following. So I'm going to say from API underscore application, I'm going to import DB, and I'm going to say from date time import date time, just like that. We're going to use date time for something, so I'm going to create a class here, and this class is going to be equal to do. It's going to be our database, so we're going to db.model, just like that, db.model, and this is going to be our database model. So we're going to have an ID. Our database is going to have the following columns, so it's going to be db.column, and this column is going to be db.integer. Okay, this is going to be db.integer, and in the primary, this is going to be our primary underscore primary key. So we're going to say primary underscore key, and this is going to be true. Okay, great. So this is going to be our primary key. So this is going to be just a column. It's going to be of type integer, and it's going to be our primary key. Great. And then we can say the name, and then the name of our database is going to be db.column, and then it's going to be db.string. The string, we specify the size of the string. Let's say the title should not be more than 30 characters. Okay, and then let's say that nullable is false, means it can be null. So false means every to do must have a title, and unique, you have to say unique equals to true, just like that. I want every to do should have a unique title. And then description, and then description is going to be db.column, and you're going to say db.string, and you're going to say, you can just say that the description can be 100 characters, or I'm going to say 500 characters. And then I want to also make sure that this field is nullable. It should be false, so it should not be nullable. So I'm going to say nullable, and this should be false. And then I'm going to yeah, that's all I want for this column. And then I want to also say the created underscore at, when the to do is created, and from db.date date is going to be date time. Sorry, this is going to be db. This is going to be a column first, and then it's going to be db.date time, just like that. And then you're going to say nullable. Nullable is going to be false. It must not be empty. And then you're going to specify a default. So the default is going to be the following. So default is going to be date time dot utc now. Okay, datetime dot utc now. Make sure that you don't call it, because this is usually a function, but you're not going to call it. You're just going to pass it in like that. So this is the default, and the default is going to be datetime dot utc now. Now that we have that, I'm going to also click completed, whether the to do is completed or not, and this is going to be db.column, and this is going to be db.boolean. So it's going to be boolean, and then nullable is going to be false. It's not going to be nullable, and then default, by default, it's going to be false, just like that. So now that we have the database set up, I want to set underscore here, and set underscore rep, and then this is going to this is actually yeah, and then I'm going to simply return, self dot name of that to do. Yeah, so I'm going to return the self.name, which is going to be return the name of to do. This is going to be useful whenever you work with the terminal. Whenever you try to print out a simple to do, it's going to return to you the name of that to do. Okay, so now that we have that database set up, everything is good, so we can go ahead and actually begin to create our database. So to create a database, we have to go into our Python terminal. If you just run our application, the database won't be created. Okay, so you have to go into our Python terminal and create this from there. So I'm just going to say Python 3, and then I'm going to go ahead into the terminal. So in here, I'm going to say from API underscore application, I'm going to import DB, and just wait for that to get imported. Once that's imported, I'm also going to go ahead and actually import our to do class, which is this model right here. I'm going to import that model. So I'm going to say from API underscore application dot models import to do, just like that, and press enter. Now that is done, I'm going to do db.create underscore all. This is going to create our database, so this is going to create our database for us. So now our database has been created. So you can now let me just teach you some simple ways to create this database. So I'm going to get to do's ab equals to do dot query dot all. So if I run this and I print to do's, it's just going to be an empty list, because right now we have nothing inside of our to do our database. So I'm just going to say to do one is going to be this to do, and this is how we can add stuff in there. So you can say name, and the name is going to be, let's say, first to do content, just like that. First to do, let's say, title, and then we can now specify the description. Let's just say first to do description, just like that. And now let me just go back and look what I also need to specify. So I can also specify the created. That by default it will be this, so it is not a must. And I can also specify the completed if I want, but because it has default value, so it will default to false. So I'm not going to provide those. Let me just go back to the terminal and close off this, and then press enter. I'm just going to now add this to the database. So I'm going to db.session.add, and I'm going to say to do one, just like that. So this is going to add the first to do into our database. So now do db.session.commit. So if you do db.session.add, it's not actually going to add it. It just tells you that, hey, you're going to make some changes. But if you now do commit, you're going to commit those changes, which is actually going to write this into the database. So now if I bring back the command where we are trying to get the to-dos, so we're going to db.query.all, and then I just simply do to-dos, just like this, and you can see we have that to do there, which returns to us the title of the to do, and that's what I specified here to return to us self.name, which is just the name of that to do. So great. So now that we have that set up, you can even add more to dos. Let's go ahead and try to add some more to dos. So let's say another to do, let's say this is going to be second. Let me just say get the spelling of second right, just like that, and then we change this also to be second, just like that. And you can now also, if you want to specify, you can specify completed or not, or something like that. So you can say completed, and the completed you can say to be true, just like that. And you can now run it, and you can do db.session.add, and then we're going to say to do one. Okay, I forgot to change the name, but it's say to do one, and then you say db.session.commit. Commit, write those into the database, and then you can do query the database again. You can do db.to-dos, it's going to be db.query.all, and then you can do to-dos, just like that, and you can see we have two to-dos there. Okay, so now that we have those to-dos in there, everything is working as expected. So we can actually just query through. You can just say for to do in to do.query.all, and then in here I'm going to print to do.name, just like that, and then also print to do.description, and also print to do.created underscore at, and also do print to do.completed, you can say, just like that. And I can just go ahead and run this, so you can see we have all the to do. So the first to do has the first to do title, first to do description, and then created as this time, and then it's completed is false. Then we can have the second to do, which is this one here. Second to do is description, is created at, and then it's completed, it's going to be true. So that's how you can create different things. So let's learn how to delete something. So I'm going to say do to do one to do underscore one, and this is going to be this is going to get a single to do from our database, and I'm going to show you how to do this just to get a single to do rather than all the to dos. I'm going to say to do dot query dot get, and I'm going to provide the ID of this. So if I provide the ID, it's going to return to me the ID of that specific to do, and the ID I just wanted to do with an ID of 1. So if I press enter and I do to do underscore 1 dot name, so if I run this, we can see this is the first to do. So I can also do to do underscore 1 dot ID is going to return to me 1, which is the ID of that idea to do. Let's say that I wanted to delete the second to do, so I'm going to get to do underscore 2 is going to be to do dot get dot dot query dot get, and I'm going to get to do it an ID of 2, and then this is going to be the second to do. So if I do to do underscore 2 dot name, you can see second to do title. So great, that's the second to do. So I want to delete it, so I'm going to db dot session dot delete, and I'm still going to pass in my to do underscore 2 just like that, and I press enter, and again db dot session dot commit. Okay, every time you have to do db dot session dot commit to write the changes permanent to database, because this just tells the database, hey, we want to do a change, and this actually runs that change and permanently updates the database. So if I run this, this is going to delete that to do from our database. So if I do this is going to get all the to do. So I'm going to choose dot query dot all. Let me just get all the to dos, and I just do. You can see I have only 1 to do there. Previously we were having 2 to dos, but now I have only 1 to do in my database. So great. So now we this is how you can simply this is very simple queries to navigate your SQLite database. Yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about in this tutorial. Okay, there are many SQLite queries that you can run. We can cover all of them. I just showed you the very basics. So in the next tutorial, we'll actually begin to build the CRUD functionality for our API, which is to create, retrieve, update, and delete different to-dos. So that's what we're going to be covering in the next tutorial. So guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, kindly consider subscribing. It keeps me motivated to keep making these videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Keep safe.